Thank you for granting us a few minutes to allow others to join. Again, my name is Phumzile Jele. I am from the Office of the Strategic Management under the long-term development, and I wish to welcome you all to our brown bag session today. And I will allow our speakers to introduce themselves and allow them to give us their presentation. And then after that, we'll take questions and we'll do an answer question session after the presentation. So I will allow Nirvana to have the floor. Nirvana, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Phumzile. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's good to see that we've got such an amazing turnout this afternoon. Thank you for allowing us some of your time to take you through some of the learnings from the course that we attended at the Hague Academy. So for those of you that do not know me, my name is Nirvana Srikisun. I'm currently working within the Performance Monitoring and Evaluations Unit in the city, and I'm also assisting in the Human Settlements Engineering and Transport Cluster. I've been in the city for a number of years, so I prefer to actually not use a designation because the type of work that I do is quite transversal in nature, and I've worked with a lot of the units in the city, not just the units that I'm based in. So I prefer to call myself a government practitioner. A lot of the work that I currently do is centered around the SDGs and the monitoring of the SDGs. So that's the Sustainable Development Goals. And we'll get into some of that work later on. Let me hand over to Ola to introduce herself, and then we can get going. Thanks, colleagues.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Ola Debe from the Strategy Office. I'm under long-term development planning. I also do some work with digitization as part of the StratHub team, and I'm also involved with some of the SDG work in terms of awareness and some of the programs that we're doing in the city. Thank you.
Thanks, Ola. So we are going to be doing a joint presentation this afternoon, colleagues. I'm just waiting for the slides to come up on screen. Perhaps whilst that's being done, just as a bit of an introduction, Ola and I attended a course at the Hague Academy for Local Governance earlier this year. It was in March. We applied for a scholarship for the course, and it was titled on inclusive service delivery and the Sustainable Development Goals. Essentially, only a selected number of applicants are accepted for this course on an annual basis. It's approximately 10% of the applicants that actually get the scholarship. So it was actually a great opportunity for us. The training was extremely valuable and offered a lot of new insight into how we can go about implementing projects and programs to achieve the SDGs. The training is actually done as a mixture of theory, group work, lots of in-class discussions, sharing of experiences from the different countries that colleagues came from. We received a number of presentations and engaged with very useful discussions with experts. And it also included a lot of site visits that gave us a practical idea of how things actually work in The Hague. One of the requirements of the training was that we produce a back home action plan for implementation. So essentially, the back home action plan talks to how we're going to use what we've learned in the training and come back home to the different organizations or municipalities that we come from, and then use that and implement within our organizations. So in our case, our back home action plan was concentrating on increasing SDG awareness within the city, both at the level of our staff as well as the residents of the city. So this brown bag session actually kickstarts those awareness sessions. Also, as a bit of an introduction, the Hague Academy for Local Government is a cooperation between the International Cooperation Agency of the Association of the Netherlands Municipalities and the Municipality of The Hague. Its aim is to strengthen local democracy worldwide, and it contains or it hosts a number of annual trainings. There's 13 of them, as well as tailor-made trainings in different countries worldwide. They've trained more than 5,000 participants from over 85 countries. So this training concentrated on, as I said, inclusive service delivery and the Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs, or as the broader term is known as the Sustainable Development Goals, are premised on leaving no one behind. Hence the concept of inclusive service delivery being tied to the SDGs. The course explored tools to achieve inclusivity and the SDGs, for example, decentralization, different means of obtaining participation from the community, etc. And we will explore those as part of today's Brown Bag session. Today's session will also cover the results of the SDG survey that was conducted a while ago. And I'm now going to hand over to Qola to kick us off as the next step in this Brown Bag presentation. Thanks, Qola.
Thanks, Nirvana. Okay, yeah, my slides are moving. So colleagues, I will cover basically just the key takeaways from the inclusive service delivery aspects of the course. And again, I'll hand over to Nirvana to do just the SDGs and also link it back to what we are doing in the city. You'll see a QR code on the screen. So if you can just take your phone and scan, you can already participate in a mini survey that we've got on the slides, and we'll go through the results at the end of the presentation. So basically, when we're talking about services, in our context, we're talking about local government, and there's a range of activities. You already see the pictures there, like your water, water and sanitation. You've got your waste management services, your police, health services, and so on. So what really characterizes government services is the fact that you don't really have a choice. So you can't really say this municipality is not doing really well in this aspect. So therefore, I'm going to go for services somewhere else. So I think that's the important aspect to understand, that as citizens, you really don't have a choice for some of the services, which is why then it becomes really important as government practitioners to focus on then how do we improve services and how do we become more inclusive in how we provide services, how do we make them more affordable, and also how do we increase the quality of the services that we provide. So that was one of the main objectives of the course, to basically, as different practitioners from different parts of the world, to basically discuss the challenges that we have from the countries that we come from, and see then what is practical in moving us forward, and also then understanding the link between the achievement of SDGs and the delivery of services locally. And then when, again, we speak about inclusive governance, you can't really talk about quality service delivery without really looking at whether you are inclusive and also whether you are reaching every part of the population. So that's looking at your marginalized communities and so on. I think also with the course, we had really some good examples of inclusive governance. There's a local municipality that we visited. So it's a rural area, and it's mostly elderly, the population, and the mayor of that municipality, to basically engage the citizens, what he does is he does a bike tour every year. He stops, he goes to farms and so on. So that's an example of inclusive service delivery. I think also there was an example of how can you include people that have disabilities. So when you're planning and designing things, do we actually think that far? So again, with this definition, it's thinking about all people, especially those that are disadvantaged. And in our context, you're looking at youth, you're looking at women, and we also do a lot of projects with homeless people in the city. You're looking at migrants and refugees and so on. So as different units in the municipality, the task is then to go back and think about are we really inclusive? Do we really meaningfully engage people when we plan, when we write policies, when we design programs? Can we actually say we are being inclusive as we should be? And this quotation at the bottom, it says, "Tell me and I will forget, show me and I'll remember, involve me and I will understand." It's also then saying that the more we engage citizens and the more we empower them with knowledge and co-design with them, the more they take ownership of the services, and everything just works better. So that's the end goal, to basically have a system basically where citizens are adequately engaged so that they are empowered to partake in governance basically. And again, this is just adding on that you can't really separate being inclusive and good governance. So when you're talking about being inclusive, you're looking at participation. So it's not just a tick box exercise because a project requires you to do so, but you really want to know that what you are designing or what you're trying to deliver is really meeting the needs of the people that you are servicing. And again, it's supposed to help overcome social barriers in a proactive way, and also looking at accessibility. It's not just about looking at people with disabilities, but also if we are talking about digitalization, what does it mean for people that don't have access, and what can we do to ensure that no one is left behind? And also then equal access to opportunities, and also being mindful of new solutions that we are bringing on or creating, that they're not creating new barriers where someone is left more disadvantaged than they were before. And on the right, you will just see then again the principles that are linked to good governance. So it's again promoting accountability, transparency, and being responsive, which is also something that we spoke about quite a bit, that sometimes as government, we engage people, we go and do surveys, but we don't really go back to say, these are the outcomes and this is what we're going to do about them. So that was a key thing to also take back and look at in terms of, do we really go back and then say, this is what we've done with the information that's given to us by citizens. Again, with participation, there's different levels. It's not necessarily that the highest level of participation is always what's needed, but for some programs or projects, the highest level of participation is always, the best way to go. With this ladder, with informing, it's just letting people know that this is what we're going to do, and you get comments, but you're not necessarily obligated to go back and give feedback and really fully involve people in the co-design. And I think then with consultation, it's just a little bit above that. You're just asking for people's opinions. For example, if you're looking at annual targets in the SDBIP, you're just asking for opinions and then you go away and do what you need to. With recommendations, you're asking the community what they want us to do. For example, you're getting ward councillors recommendation on where to place a gym or a new facility. So you get those recommendations and you make a decision based on the recommendation that you've received. With co-production, you involve the community actively in deciding what to do. But government makes the ultimate decision. So you do a full-on process in terms of engagement, but then you make the ultimate decision, having given the trust that you have taken into full account what the community has had to say. And then with delegation, government tells community what they want and how, and then they give the communities to the resources to implement. I wouldn't say we're quite there with that as yet because of different things, lack of trust between government and citizens. But I think to a certain extent where the city has SPVs and other mechanisms, I think that's a form of delegation, because then you do give an SPV, for example, resources to implement what you then in local government, it would take you longer, or there's just too much red tape for you to do. So an SPV would be more agile in doing that. So there are examples where in the city there's those cases. And again, I think I have spoken about responding. So if you ask for feedback, it's not enough to have then 100 responses that you do nothing about. So it's always important to also have capacity to go through the comments and make sure that you're giving quality feedback and consideration. Then in terms of the principle leaving no one behind, it was on both aspects of the course. So on the inclusive service delivery and also on the SDGs aspect. Again, it's about marginalized communities. So not just catching the people that are easy to reach and consulting those. Like for example, in the city that we were in, there's I think on Thursdays at 2 or something, there's public council meetings. But if you look at a setup like that, people that can be there at 2, it's people that probably don't work. You end up having the same representatives. So it's not really, you are being you are involving people, but it's not really effective. So it's also looking at, are my methods effective, basically. So there's an ACAP model that you can use to basically see what aspects you need to look at in terms of ensuring that no one is left behind. And the first one is accessibility. So for example, meeting in communities rather than where it's convenient for you. So can people access the area where you're asking them to meet? Again, also looking at physical barriers, for example, looking at language barriers, communication, ensuring that you're not using municipal jargon or abbreviations that people don't necessarily understand, because you might be doing the exercise of consulting people, but it's not really giving you the results that you would like. And again, with attitude, it's ensuring that you respect all the inputs. Again, here you'd also have to be sensitive to gender issues and so on. And then ensuring that you don't, what's the word, class people and make these people more important or take their opinions to a higher regard than others. So it's just having that fairness towards the participants, and then also just finding alternatives to get input from everyone. So if you see there's a group that's not really participating as much you would like, find a different way to engage them. You might need to separate the community and so on. Okay, and then in terms of conditions for successful and inclusive citizen participation, what do you want to see to ensure that you are, doing the best in terms of engaging people? So you want people to be empowered, to basically also understand the subject that you are engaging them about. They have to have the necessary skills and knowledge and the background information, and also give people the ability to organize themselves. So instead of just randomly setting up a meeting, look at what structures are already existing in the community, so that you engage people through those structures where it's practical to do so. And then effectively looking at effectively implemented laws. So again, there are regulations or laws that guide how we should do public participation. Like, for example, with environmental impact assessments, you might need to put notices and so on. Again, it's not enough to just do the bare minimum, but you'd also just need to then go back and check, is it effective? Am I getting the feedback that I need? And if not, how do I then improve the process? And it's, again, that's commitments to genuine inclusion. So it's not just a tick box exercise, but you genuinely want to know what people are requesting of you. And then thorough identification and understanding of stakeholders. Again, that also would inform your approach so that you're not doing the same method of engagement that doesn't necessarily work for a particular stakeholder. Again, planning and so on. So I'm not going to go through everything. But again, I think an important one here is trust between government and citizens. So I think a point that was also raised is that people don't really want to participate in surveys or in any engagements because then they feel government just then comes and takes the information and then nothing gets done. So the next time someone else, genuinely needs inputs, then people are despondent. So that there's that erosion of trust between government and citizens, which then could affect how effective your engagement is. Okay, here again, there is a QR code that you can scan. I would just like your feedback in terms of where you would rate us. So this is a clear model that was done by the Council of Europe in terms of how would you rate the level of consultation. So you would rate this as a citizen of eThekwini, for example. As government. So there are 5 areas. So can people participate, first of all? So are people empowered to participate? Do they like to participate in our engagements? Are they enabled to? So do they have the necessary tools and information in order for them to participate effectively? Do we really ask people, first of all, to participate, or do we just design things and carry on and do them? And lastly, do we respond? So here it's a score out of 5 that you would have to rate in the survey. So out of these aspects, do we get 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5? And then it's also something that we could discuss in the Q&A. What do you think is lacking out of these 5 aspects? Then another aspect of the training was basically talking about decentralization and service delivery, and this was part of the finance aspect of the training. So it basically looks at, because it is a local government institution, so we were looking at our role as local government as it relates to national government or provincial government. And when you're talking about decentralization, you're basically looking at the transfer of power away from central authority. So in our case, if you're looking at national government to lower levels, to basically say, this is a national issue, but you would then need to act on it at a city level or at a local government level. But I think what was interesting with this is looking at whether with decentralization, are we getting the resources we need to actually respond to local issues? And do we have all the authority and power to act on these things, or do we still need to consult provincial and national for some of the things? So that was just a conversation to think about whether as local government we feel we're empowered enough to deal with issues. I'll make an example of homelessness because most of the time when we have engagements, the resources for homelessness would sit at provincial or national level, but it is a local problem that we need to respond to as a city. So it's having those conversations to look at what can we do in terms of decentralizing resources and authority to make us more effective. And this slide basically speaks to the benefits of decentralization. So you have increased participation because then you are local and you are, at the coalface of the problem, and you understand the challenges better than someone who would, for example, be sitting at provincial government. And Then it's also increasing accountability and local decision making, and also looking at the time it takes for things to be done or services to be delivered. If it's completely decentralized, then it makes it much easier. Then increasing stability and also improving local economic developments, because you're making decisions at a local level, and obviously that would then result in improve service delivery. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. You'll see in the slide again, there was, with the finance aspect of the course, there's also just looking at creative ways to respond where you don't necessarily have all the resources or the authority that you need. So looking at ways to partner with the private sector, to partner with civil society to respond at a local level, even though you don't necessarily have all the resources. So that was just another component of the course. I'll hand over to Nirvana and she'll go into the SDG aspect. Thank you.
Thanks, Xola. So, colleagues, as you've seen from what Xola has been explaining, inclusive service delivery is definitely linked to whether or not we achieve the goals of the SDGs. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Xola. So essentially, the SDGs were premised on what was called the MDGs, or the Millennium Development Goals. The Millennium Development Goals were essentially 8 goals that were adopted by the United Nations member states in the year 2000, hence the name Millennium Development Goals. And it committed world leaders to combating poverty, to reducing or decreasing hunger, to dealing with diseases, illiteracy, environmental degradation, and discrimination against women. Each of these Millennium Development Goals had targets similar to the SDGs, and those targets were set to be achieved by the year 2015. There were also indicators to monitor the progress on those targets, starting with the 1990 level. So it looked at a longer time span for monitoring. However, what was realized is that despite many successes, the poorest and the most vulnerable people were being left behind, because the Millennium Development Goals concentrated only on developing countries. So in 2015, the findings of the report indicated that gender inequality persisted, that there were widening gaps or bigger gaps between the poorest and the richest households, as well as between rural and urban areas. Climate change and environmental degradation undermined the progress that was being achieved, and that poor people were suffering the most. We also had the fact that conflicts remained despite some of the progress that was being made, and it was a big threat to human development. And finally, the last finding was that millions of poor people still lived in poverty and hunger without access to basic services. So in the year 2000, the United Nations changed from the MDGs to the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals are based on experience from the Millennium Development Goals. They are more inclusive, so they're not concentrating only on developing nations, but on developed nations as well. In other words, all countries in the world. They're global and universal in nature, and they are integral for the progress of every single person in the world. Hence, also us saying that no one is left behind if the SDGs are achieved. They are measurable, and I'll get to that in a little bit more detail as we proceed. And as I've indicated, they leave no one behind. Maybe just for those that are not aware, if we look at the SDGs, as I indicated, there's 17 of them. Number 1 is talking about the fact that there should be no poverty. Number 2, that there should be zero hunger in the world. The third is that we should have good health and well-being for all citizens in the world. The fourth is that we must have quality education. Number 5 is that there should be gender equality. Number 6 is clean water and sanitation. Number 7 is affordable and clean energy. 8 is decent work and economic growth. 9 is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. 10 is reducing inequalities in all its forms. 11, and this is where, as a municipality, we concentrate on quite a bit, because it's talking to sustainable cities and communities. Number 12 is responsible consumption and production. 13 is climate action. 14 is talking about life below water. 15 is life on land. 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And 17 is partnerships for the goals. What you'll find when you start working with the SDGs is that these are all intertwined and they're linked. No goal rests on its own without being linked to the others. I'm now referring to the little diagram, the circle at the bottom. And basically, what it's saying is that the SDGs help us to achieve peace in the planet. Sorry, I just want to, it's a bit small on my side. Sorry, one sec. I'm just going to go back. So the SDGs are looking at peace, planet, prosperity, partnership, and people. Those are called the 5 Ps, or the 5 components of the SDGs, and the 17 SDGs fall within each one of those 5 components. Follow the next slide, please. Sorry, follow the next slide, please. Okay.
Sorry,
Perfect.
my computer is stuck. Let me just play this. I didn't share my sound, so I might need to unshare it, but let me just try if you can hear anything. No sound, right?
No.
Okay. Apologies, colleagues. Maybe while we do that, colleagues, I've just put in the survey. So if you didn't scan the QR code, you can also use the link to participate. I'm just going to share my sound. Nirvana, I think let's skip the video. It's my computer that's slow. So every time I press something, it lags. So apologies for that.
Not a problem, colleagues. We'll circulate it as part of the presentation. So
see if I can still navigate.
Okay, so that video was basically providing an indication of some of the numbers that are linked with the SDGs, the number of goals and the targets, etc. Essentially, as I've indicated, there's 17 goals. The 17 goals are broken up into 169 targets, and those targets are then monitored by means of 231 indicators. There is an SDG tracker that is being used by the United Nations to monitor the progress of the different countries in achieving those particular indicators and the related targets. Next slide, please, Bola. Okay, the localization of the SDGs is, I'm going to read this from the definition. It's considered to be a process of considering subnational context in the achievement of the 2030 agenda, from setting the goals and targets to determining the means of implementation and using indicators to measure and monitor progress. Essentially, what that means is localization requires that every nation in the world consider the SDGs within their own context. What may be applicable in one country or one city may not necessarily be applicable in another country or city. Hence, we've been allowed the opportunity to localize based on the country and the city context. That includes localizing the United Nations list of SDG monitoring indicators to suit our purposes. So in terms of the process for localization, the three main roles for local actors and governments is to set the agenda for localization and for achieving the SDGs within their city through the process of raising awareness and advocacy. And as I indicated when we started this session, is part of that process. The second is to actually implement the goals by adopting a subset of those goals and the targets for which are applicable within the city. In the case of eThekwini, we have adopted there's about 7 goals that we are now concentrating on. They include things like gender equality, water, energy, etc. Primarily those goals that are related to the responsibilities of a city. And we're starting off looking at programs, projects, and initiatives to achieve those goals. Once those are done, we can then move on to the others. Then lastly, we are required to monitor progress on the goals at a subnational level. What has happened here is when the SDGs were originally adopted, the reporting was to be done at a country level. In the case of South Africa, Statistics South Africa is the body that's responsible for monitoring of our targets and indicators at a country level. However, as time progressed, it was realized that the actual work required to achieve the SDGs is not done at national level or the country level. It is actually done at the city level. And it then became necessary for cities to localize even further and come up with indicators that they can monitor at a city level to ensure that work is being done towards achieving the SDGs. Thanks, Kola. Next slide. So with the SDGs, the process again involves starting with the local problems and not ready-made solutions. I've discussed this already. So what may be applicable in one country may not necessarily apply in our context. So for example, if we're looking at climate disasters, you may have a country that's more prone to earthquakes and they need to do more around dealing with earthquakes than we do in South Africa. We also need to understand what is politically feasible and engage with the politics. Support from politicians is key in actually achieving the SDGs. So it's important to have that engagement and ensure that we are on board with the politicians and they agree with the steps that we're taking. Next, we need to support change that reflects local realities and is locally led. Again, things like nature-based solutions being used in building of human settlements, for example, what is considered a nature-based solution in South Africa may be different to what is considered a nature-based solution in another country. So these need to be brought down to the local context. We then talk about being adaptive and not being afraid to try. The SDGs, unfortunately, we have 7 years left to achieve them. We haven't made enough progress. And a lot of it is because countries have been complacent and they have not found themselves in a situation where they are willing to put in the effort to try new things, be innovative and be different. And they're just continuing with life as normal, so there's no progress made. It's tied in with the next point, which is talking about thinking like an entrepreneur, spread the risks and make small bets. So look at what you can actually achieve. As it's saying, spread the risks, get other people involved so that it's much easier to achieve. And the last point in terms of localization is to foster real results and real solutions to real problems so that it has a real impact to the people on the ground and to achievement of those goals. The good news is that eThekwini has made progress with a lot of these. We do have very strong support from our political leadership within the city. There was actually council resolution about 2.5 years ago to form an SDG institutionalization committee in the city. And that committee's primary responsibility is to deal with issues of SDG localization and institutionalization. We have also now had or finalized our list of localized SDG indicators that we will be using for city-based reporting. The other thing that we've decided as a city is that although we have chosen specific goals to concentrate on in terms of the projects and programs, we will be reporting on all of the SDGs, whether or not they are the city's responsibility to achieve. We understand that we don't operate in isolation. So we are dependent on what happens at provincial level and at national level, hence us deciding to report on all SDG indicators wherever that data is available, though. We also now have an open SDG portal, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we're busy gathering data to actually start reporting on our SDG indicators, and that's the localized set of indicators. So, Paula, back to you.
Thank you, Nirvana. I'm going to just take you through the results of this internal survey, and thank you so much to everyone that participated. The aim of the survey was basically to just see what do people understand about SDGs, or are people already doing anything about them in their individual capacity or in their units. So we published this survey on Info on the 25th of April. We had 131 people that responded to it. And I'll credit Annelisiwe and Faith, who assisted in putting the survey together and also just summarizing the results. So we wanted to know, do people know SDGs at all? So 48% said yes, and then 18% partially, and 34% of the respondents said no. And the second question on the right was, if you responded that you know, how many SDGs are there? So 66% of the respondents got that answer right, which is 17. And then 21% thought it was 12, and then 13% thought it was 5. So it just gives you an indication of if we then design an internal awareness program, where do we pitch, and who are we, what's the different range of knowledge basically within the municipality. Then for those that answered no or partially, would they be interested to learn more about SDGs? We had 85% of the people say yes, and then 15 said no. Then the next question was, who should be responsible for implementing SDGs? A lot of people got it right that it's all of the above. So it's a collective effort. It's not necessarily that it's just developed countries and or it's not developing countries that should be responsible. So it's understanding that everyone has a part to play. So a lot of people got that right. And then, do all the SDGs apply to local governments? 77% said yes, 22 said no. Then the next question was basically trying to understand, do people understand the linkage of SDGs to their work, or do they think they are relevant? So 78% said yes, 19% said they weren't really sure, and 3% no. And for then the follow-up question was basically then elaborating on your answer. So this is just a summarized version of some of the responses that we got. So a lot of people do think SDGs are critical to the city strategy and municipal services in general. And then we had a few people say they genuinely just don't know what SDGs are, so they couldn't really connect them to anything that they do. So yeah, you see the range of answers. I'm not going to read all of them. Then looking at local governments, do SDGs apply to local governments? So majority said yes for that one. And then what should the municipality focus on to promote the achievement of SDGs? So I think people had an option of choosing three out of the 5 options. So I think most people thought that we should, as a municipality, align SDGs more to our plans and strategies. I think the second one was more assigning relevant SDGs to relevant units. So if there's health units, then they would deal with the health SDG. I think it's a start, but if you work with SDGs, you find that you can't really separate them like that. But I guess for having some sense of ownership or elevating SDGs in various environments, it's something that could work. Then the next one was more increasing awareness. So yeah, that's things that we are trying to work on. And then allocating more resources, whether it's human resources or budgets, that would go towards SDGs. And then the last one was more creating partnerships. So it's not necessarily just the municipality acting on its own to achieve SDGs, but just creating a conducive environment for the private sector, academia, and so on to get involved. Then the next question was, of the 5 Ps, which one is most important to you? So a lot of people chose people as most important, which is more looking at ending poverty and hunger. With planet, it was protecting the planet from degradation. With peace, it was ending violence and ensuring that we are just and inclusive. And then with prosperity, we are determined to ensure that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives. And the last one was partnerships. Again, here people had the option of choosing, I think, 2 or 3 options. So that's why you'd see that the numbers don't add up to the 130. Then here, just trying to see what are people already doing. As an individual, what do you think you can contribute? So a lot of people, again, were leaning towards the awareness part of the programs. And again, I think a lot of people link SDGs primarily to the environment and climate change and so on. So when you ask people about actions, most of them tend to lean towards, doing something for the environment, preventing pollution and so on. Again, with this one, it's avoiding the waste of resources, building capacity, incorporating SDGs into work. So which is something that, still needs a bit of work in terms of ensuring that we are considering SDGs, whether it's a project, whether it's a new program or new policy, that somehow we link it back to SDGs is something that would be great to achieve. Then we ask for ideas and suggestions. So again, you'll see awareness coming up, partnerships, promotion of projects that have multiple co-benefits for society. I think this was a great one because you don't want to deal with just one aspect of the SDGs, but trying to ensure that you can maximize the benefits of, one program dealing with hunger, whether it's water and sanitation and poverty. So I think it would be great to figure out how we could achieve that as a municipality. Obviously some people didn't have suggestions, and then these couldn't really be summarized into anything concrete. Just then looking at the survey and the feedback that we had gotten. So awareness, I think I've mentioned it already. And then also looking at processes of ensuring that we embed SDGs into our processes. So that's also part of the institutionalization journey. So that's ongoing work. Again, allocating resources towards SDGs, whether it's towards awareness or SDG projects, and then creation of strategic partnerships. I think I've already spoken about that. And then ongoing advocacy, whether it's internal or external, I think is something that would be great to invest in. Nirvana will then just share some of the initiatives that are already going on in the city or planned. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. I think important for us to note here is that all of the work that is currently being done in the city is in some way or the other linked to the SDGs, and it's not new. Very often when we've been requesting information on the SDGs, people think that we're asking them to do extra work and that it's new, but it isn't really. And that's also talking to the importance of realizing that service delivery is essentially entwined with the SDGs. So in terms of current work that's being done in the city around the awareness raising on the SDGs, is that we are going to be expanding these sessions. So we started off with this brown bag session, but we're going to be having dedicated sessions for the councillors, another session for staff that looks at much more detail on the SDGs and what we learned in the course. There will also be similar sessions for residents of the city so that we can highlight how they can get involved in achieving the SDGs. There's also going to be in-person sessions for the project managers in the city. So we look at how they can go about planning their projects with the SDGs in mind. One of the important things that we learned is that when projects are being planned and conceptualized, it is very, very important that the SDGs are considered right up front and that indicators for monitoring the SDG aspects of those projects are set right up front, so it makes things easier as we move along. It's not something we're doing as a city at the moment, and therefore we are going to be having sessions to try and bring project managers on board to start doing that. We're also doing a number of projects around using things like public art to get communities involved in the SDGs and to raise awareness on the SDGs. The city has also been invited to be part of the World's To-Do List campaign, which is a campaign that's being hosted by the City of London. Essentially, what that campaign does is it takes the 17 SDGs and views it as a to-do list for the world. So those 17 SDGs for awareness raising purposes, each of the SDGs are printed on a blown up version of a post-it note, and they advertised around the city on, for example, the bridges, the buildings, on buses, on vehicles, etc. For those of you that were in the city in October last year, when the Executive Director UN Habitat was around, you would have noted that one of the initiatives we undertook was to plant a vegetable garden outside City Hall. And there was a World's To-Do List campaign emblem, if I can call it that, talking about ending world hunger in that garden, and that's linked to the World's To-Do List campaign. In terms of the other work that is being done around the SDGs, we're busy with the data collection for reporting on the SDGs. That, as I said, is work in progress. But what we're also doing at the moment is updating the Open SDG portal So the Open SDG portal is currently embedded in the eThekwini Strategic Hub. It will be open access to whoever wants the data once we have all that data and it's uploaded. We're going to be using that portal for reporting on our SDG progress. And once we have all of the data for reporting on those indicators, they will appear in that portal. So it's work in progress. We will update the reporting as we collect the data. One of the other exercises that we're busy on is trying to link existing projects and programs in the city to the SDGs for tracking purposes. There's a lot of excellent work that's being done in the city, and those projects are linked to the SDGs, but there's not a lot of awareness around what those projects are. We're also working on the institutionalization process, as Paula was saying earlier, and that, as I also said, is looking at how do we consider the SDGs at the time that projects and programs are conceptualized. We are also in partnership with organizations or academia like the University College London, where we're undertaking specific projects that are aimed at particular SDGs. So the work that we're doing with University College London is looking at SDG 6, which is on sanitation. There was one component that's completed already, which looked at the synergies between achieving the sanitation targets and the other SDG targets. And we're now looking at the next phase of the project, which is assessing different types of on-site sanitation solutions. Again, as part of the awareness raising of the work that the city is also doing, we're going to be creating videos on the SDG programs and projects in the city. And then from a holistic point of view, a number of our units and departments within the city are working on projects like the urban gardening work. There's a lot of work that's being done on composting. There's work that's being done around renewable energy, etc. Colleagues, this is not an exhaustive list. There is much more work that's being done out there. Quite a number of you would have received communication from us in the past, requesting an indication of that work. And it's not to hold a stick over anybody's head. It's just so that we can keep track of what is happening in the city. That's it from me in terms of the current initiatives. I also just wanted to say that it's, again, I mean, the numbers have increased in terms of the number of people that are now in attendance. So it's good to have this number on board. And we would appreciate your support and any other guidance and suggestions that you may have around the SDGs as we proceed with trying to institutionalize it within the city. This last slide that Ola's got up now is just a list of resources that we have used to prepare the presentations. We will also be sharing the link to the scholarship for, it's called the Orange Knowledge Program. So the scholarship we applied for is called the Orange Knowledge Program. It's open to any municipal officials, in fact, not even just municipal officials, any officials that are working on service delivery and the SDGs. There is a process to be followed, but we can share that link and you can feel free to go and have a look and apply to the course if you need to. There's other courses as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be the SDG course, but essentially, colleagues, that's it from Ola and myself. As we've indicated, there will be other sessions that we'll be holding as time goes. But yeah, we're done for now. We will then open up for any questions, comments, or queries that anybody has through yourself, Chair. Thanks, colleagues.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, Kola. Thank you, Nirvana. We will love to allow the colleague to ask their questions. And I think I'm also, I wanted to highlight that it is awesome that even on the survey, it is a larger number of our colleagues that even know and understand what SDGs are. But then, ladies, I wanted to just have to ask what is a plan that is available for those
that few percentage that still thinks that I don't want to be involved. I don't know what is this, and I don't think I have to know what is this. So maybe a plan on how most departments or most people within the municipality can have that feel and understanding of how important the SDGs are. So I know that you guys have started the work, but to just inform the colleagues the plan going forward of things that you are planning to do in terms of them, if they are interested, to say, I don't know what is this, and I would like to get more information. So where do I go?
Chair, sorry, before I answer that, I note that Dr. Mbata is saying that everyone is muted, so they're unable to answer or ask questions. Maybe we just need to unmute everybody if that's possible.
No problem. I've just unmuted everyone, and thanks, Mr. Mbata.
Thank you. So, Chair, just to respond to your initial question, and Paula can add, what we are also doing as part of the awareness sessions is we've engaged our communications unit to put out communique in info or on info as well as social media, etc., dealing with the specific SDGs that we're concentrating on as a city. But over and above that, that communique will provide an indication of how colleagues can get involved. In saying that, though, it's always an open invitation. Anybody is welcome to contact us, as I said, with any suggestions, any questions, any queries. It's an open book. It's not something any of us are going to achieve on our own. It's recognized that the SDGs cannot be achieved alone, and we can only do it by working together and through partnerships. So we don't necessarily also know everything. It's also a learning journey for us, and it's work in progress. So colleagues, if you have any suggestions or queries, please feel free to email us or contact us, and we're happy to work with you to take those forward. We have been doing it with a number of units and departments, and we're happy to further that.
Thank you, Nirvana, for that answer. Colleagues, it's your opportunity to ask questions. All your mics are unmuted, so when you have a question, you can raise your hand and ask a question. The ladies are here to answer. Okay, I see that no one have a question. It seems as if the presentation was quite clear and understood. And I think with that being said, if Xola or Nirvana have nothing else to share with the colleagues, then maybe our session will end here. Ladies, I'm not sure if you have anything else to share.
No, Phumzile, I think I was just looking at the results. I'll just read them out. I'll share them with the presentation when we share it. But in terms of the CLEAR model, it's 1.8 out of 5. It would have been interesting to just hear from the colleagues what's missing, what's really a 0 for us in terms of the CLEAR model. The rating question, I think Empowered Citizen is number 1 in terms of what's the most important in terms of achieving like a completely inclusive governance model. I tend to agree with that. Then as a resident of eThekwini, the average rating is 2.8. So yeah, but I'll share these as well. Thank you. Thanks everyone that joined.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. The colleagues are going to share the information with you all, and thank you very much for sharing your time with us. Thank you so much. You can have the good day.
Thank you very much for your time, colleagues. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.